Alright, so welcome back to Dominion Dark Ages What's in the Box, Part 3. Now, for this video, I'm going to start with one of my most favorite forecasting cards in this expansion, and talk a little bit about some interesting strategies that work with this one particular card, as well as some of the cards we've actually already gone over. Alright, so the card I'm talking about is Rats. Now, at first, it doesn't seem like it could be very useful. So let's go over it. You get a card, you get an action, and that's basic. Then you gain a Rats. Ooh, so you get another action card, a Rats. Then you trash a card from your hand other than a Rats, or reveal a hand of all Rats. And then when you trash this, you get +1 card. So, obviously, looking at it, you're probably thinking, oh, if I'm not careful, the Rats will eat everything on my deck except for Rats. And I could end up with a deck of just Rats cards. Because when I play it, I have to trash a card from my hand, as long as it's not a Rats. And, you know, if I played it wrong at a wrong time, and I could end up having to trash something good, like a gold, or even a province. That could happen. You could have a bunch of Rats, and then they could eat up all your treasures, and the only thing you have left are your provinces, and you end up having to trash your province now because, you know, you let the Rats run wild. And so this is a double-edged sword. This could be very, very dangerous if you're not careful. But, as I was saying, this is probably one of my most favorite cards in this expansion, nonetheless, because there are ways you can minimize the Rats' damage, the damage that the Rats will do, for sure. And of course, if you manage to trash a few Rats with other cards, you'll at least get a card as a benefit. So that's kind of cool. I like that a lot. Now, even if some of these other action cards that I'm going to mention here shortly aren't in the game with Rats, that does not mean I would still not buy a Rats. I've had a lot of fun games with the Rats. Probably more fun with the Rats than any other card in this expansion that I've had fun with. So I really love playing with this card. And you got to remember, if you think you're going to play this a lot and gain tons of Rats and the supply will empty out pretty fast, you'd be wrong, because there are 20 of these in the supply. So it'll be a while before you run through all of the Rats. So you'll be gaining a lot of Rats. If you're playing with 2 players, and you could easily gain half of those cards to your deck, maybe more, especially if the other player avoids playing with this card. Now, because they tend to be more hesitant than me. Now, this is Fortress, another forecasting card we haven't gone over yet. And it gives you a card, and it gives you 2 actions. But then when you trash this, you put this into your hand. So this is an action card that cannot be trashed in a sense. Yes, it can be trashed, but it's going to go back into your hand every time it's trashed. So this is a way of minimizing the damage with the Rats, because then you could use the Rats, you gain a card, you get a card, you get an action, you gain a Rats, then you trash the Fortress. Well, then the Fortress goes back into your hand after you trash it. Then you play another Rats, and you could trash the Fortress again, because like I said, it's back in your hand. You could keep trashing Fortress and still gain a lot of Rats and get a bunch of cards. But of course, you'll still want to, it would be useless if you just did that only. And so it's good to get rid of your coppers if you're not into a copper strategy. This is definitely not a copper strategy, in a sense. I tend to buy a few extra coppers. And I also tend to like to play with another card that I just decided to add to the table for this video. So, that makes this even better for a fun game. So, these 2 cards alone working together, is pretty powerful. And like I said, this will minimize the damage if you have these around. Of course, you'll still want to use this to trash cards, like your coppers, and get rid of ruins, etc., etc. Especially if another player's been playing with an attack card that's giving out ruins. This can come in in handy. Okay, then we have Death Card, another forecasting card that's an action. And so Death Card is an action that's going to give you 5 treasure. That is powerful. But then you may trash an action card from your hand If you don't, you trash this. And then when you gain this, you'll gain 2 ruins. So getting the death card is going to give you a couple of ruins, but that's okay. Because if you get those ruins later on, when you play this card, you can use this death card to trash one of those ruins. You'll still get the 5 treasure, and you won't lose this action card. So that is definitely a strategy, and it's definitely worth doing. But that means at some point you're going to run out of ruins, unless the player keeps giving you ruins, of course. But then there are other ways around it. Like I said, death card and fortress. You know, obviously any card that trashes a card will work with fortress, because obviously you'll never lose this card. So that's really useful. But if you wanted to trash something even better than fortress, and you wanted to minimize the damage that rats does, getting a death card in a game with rats, oh, that's awesome. Because then you have a card here that's going to trash a lot of your useless cards and get rid of them, but then you have a way of minimizing the damage and getting rid of some of those rats by using the death card to trash the rats. So that's really cool. And then, like I said, when you trash this, you get to draw a card too. So it's giving you a benefit for whenever this happens to get trashed. It's just they can't kill each other. That's the only thing. They can't trash each other. They can't kill each other. So that's the only thing. But it can still be trashed by other cards, which is awesome. And so these 3 cards working together obviously is a good strategy. But also, these also are a good strategy. If you have the beggar, the poorhouse, and the market square, that could all be very useful together. Technically, the market square could be useful with any card that trashes cards. But if you were trashing a lot of cards with the rats, and you had market square in your hand, you could discard it to gain a gold. If you had a bunch of rats and a bunch of market squares, you could gain a lot of golds very easily. And then of course, if you had fortress around, you could keep it from keeping your rats from going out of control, for sure. Then, beggar can also be very useful, because you get 3 coppers to your hand, and then obviously you're going to get a lot of coppers at some point, and they're going to fill your deck with tons of coppers, which is a copper strategy. But you can minimize the damage that beggar will do in the end game by having too many coppers, and you can use rats to keep you from, having too many coppers on hand, or should I say in your deck. So these 2 cards working together, the beggar and the rats, also is very useful and a very powerful strategy. And then poorhouse also, when I think about it, this card would work really well with rats. If you trashed all your coppers on a turn, and you didn't have any treasures left, and you decided not to play any more rats, well, and you would still have 1 action. And if you had poorhouse still sitting in your hand, you get to play this, reveal your hand, you don't have any treasure, you get 4 money. So that could still be quite useful. Then you could buy a silver or something else costing 4, like maybe a fortress or a death card if it was in the game, for instance. So it could come in handy, especially if you had other cards that gave you plus treasure as well. That could be very useful with poorhouse, as well as any other cards here. But I find that these 6 are probably the best, that work best together. In fact, I have played a game where all 6 of these were in the same game, and it was so fun. I think I've had the most fun playing the Adventures expansion on its own, but the second expansion I've had the most fun playing with on its own is Dark Ages. Just playing Dark Ages on its own, I've had a lot of fun playing this expansion. And so these cards are definitely powerful and very useful. And we did go over rats, and we did go over fortress and death card in this video already, so we at least got through some of these 4 costing cards. But I just wanted to say that rats is an awesome card. But remember, you have to be careful with it. And there have been times where I did avoid buying the rats. There just happened some times where it just didn't seem like it was going to be super useful. But most of the time, but then I don't seem to have nearly as much fun, because I just have so much fun playing this card. I play with a lot of other players who have played against me with this, and they see what rats is capable of, and they get into it late in the game because they see what's capable of halfway through the game, and they're like, oh, we should have gotten rats to begin with too. And so I like to, in a sense, I like to show off when I play with rats. But like I said, it can be dangerous if you're not careful, especially if Fortress isn't in the game with it. It can be very dangerous, but it's still worth it for just the fun of it. So, and I've actually won several games thanks to what I like to call the RATS strategy. Now, I don't think there's an official RATS strategy, but I am definitely a RATS strategist. As far as trashing cards goes, this is definitely one of my most favorite cards that trashes cards, for sure. So I hope you guys liked this video, and we'll get back with the other forecasting cards in the next video.